The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet cul-de-sac of Willow Creek Estates, painting the manicured lawns in shades of gold and orange. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect, like a picture postcard, but I had learned long ago that appearances in this neighborhood were dangerously deceiving. Behind the pristine hedges and freshly painted fences lurked entitlement, jealousy, and the kind of petty drama that could spiral out of control at the drop of a designer handbag. And today, it was heading straight for me. I was leaning against my cherry red 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback, running my hand over the hood, feeling the cool metal hum under my fingers. The Mustang wasn't just a car, it was a statement, a piece of history, and my pride and joy. It had been passed down from my father, a man who believed that muscle cars weren't just vehicles, they were legacy. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that legacy from me, no matter how rich, entitled, or obnoxious they were. Which, of course, brought me to Karen Whitmore. Karen Whitmore was the kind of woman who wielded her HOA membership like a scepter. A stickler for rules that only seemed to apply to other people, she had the uncanny ability to turn any small inconvenience into a full-blown crisis. If there were an Olympic sport for passive-aggressive complaints, Karen would have a gold medal, a trophy room, and a custom plaque in her honor. And today, her son, Justin Whitmore, had decided to take things to the next level. I spotted Justin strutting down the sidewalk like he owned the street, designer backpack slung over one shoulder, the other hand waving as if to command attention. His eyes locked on my Mustang, and the corners of his mouth twitched with that annoying combination of smugness and entitlement. "Hey," he called out, voice sharp. "That car's sick. Let me drive it." I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms. "Drive it? You barely know what a clutch does." Justin smirked. "Doesn't matter. I want it. You should just hand it over." I laughed, a low chuckle that carried through the quiet street. "Yeah, no. Not happening." Before I could finish, Karen Whitmore appeared, stilettos clicking against the pavement, a look of righteous indignation plastered across her perfectly made-up face. "What's going on here?" she demanded, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Justin wants to borrow my car," I said calmly, letting the sarcasm drip. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Borrow? That's not borrowing." "That's," she paused, lips pursed as if searching for the right outrage. "Illegal. You can't just let him take someone else's property." I studied her for a moment, trying to read her expression. She was the kind of woman who could escalate a minor issue into a full HOA emergency in under 60 seconds. And judging by the twitch in her jaw, we were seconds away. Before I could respond, Justin had already dialed a number on his phone. "Mom, I'm calling the cops," he said casually, like this was a normal, acceptable solution. Karen froze, and then, without a second thought, she snatched the phone from his hand. "Yes, we need the police immediately. There's a man threatening my son over a vehicle. It's a Mustang. He won't give it to him. Please hurry." My stomach dropped, not because of her threat but because of how perfectly she executed it. She knew exactly which buttons to push. The flashing red and blue lights appeared over the cul-de-sac almost instantly. It was the kind of neighborhood where the HOA had a direct line to the local precinct. I could feel every neighbor's eyes on me, some whispering, some peering from behind curtains. And in that instant, I realized Karen had no idea who she was messing with. Because here's the thing, I was the police chief. I took a deep breath, calmness masking the storm inside me. I stepped forward as the patrol cars screeched to a halt, officers spilling out in uniform, hands hovering near their belts. "Chief Donovan," one of them asked, eyes wide with recognition. "Yes," I said smoothly, removing my sunglasses and letting them fall into my hand. "Donovan. Mike Donovan. What seems to be the problem?" Karen's jaw literally dropped. "Chief, you're the chief?" I gave her a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes. That would be me." Her son, Justin, paled beside her, realizing that the situation had just escalated way beyond his entitlement. I could see the gears turning in Karen's head, panic creeping in like a cold draft. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," I said, calm but with a razor-sharp edge. A young man demanding someone else's property and a mother calling the police to enforce a personal whim. Karen sputtered, the words sticking in her throat. But, my son. I held up a hand. Let's not waste time. Justin, do you actually expect anyone to hand over my car because you want to play chauffeur? Justin looked like he had just swallowed a lemon whole. I thought. Thought what? I pressed, voice low, controlled, carrying the weight of authority. That your mother could call the police on a citizen without consequences? That a Mustang would just magically transfer ownership because you wanted it? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, fumbling for words. I could practically see the realization washing over her. In the blink of an eye, the balance of power had shifted. I leaned against the Mustang, letting the sun glint off the polished paint as I surveyed the scene. The officers looked awkward, unsure whether to step in or just let me handle this. I smiled inwardly. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about entitlement, ego, and a lesson someone was about to learn the hard way. Mrs. Whitmore, I said finally, voice calm but firm, you've just learned why some rules, especially the law, apply equally to everyone. My Mustang stays where it is. End of story. And next time, consider thinking before calling the cops over a tantrum. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, her cheeks flushed, and Justin's smugness evaporated entirely. It was the kind of silence that reverberates in your bones, a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and quiet surrender. I glanced at my Mustang, gave it a casual pat, and added, oh, and one more thing, have a nice day. As the officers gave Karen a pointed look and Justin slunk back to the house, I knew this was only the beginning. The Whitmores had a lot to learn about boundaries, power, and respect. And I intended to make sure they learned it. Little did they know, though, that the quiet calm of the cul-de-sac that evening would soon be shattered not by Mustang disputes, but by a storm of consequences they never saw coming. The morning after the Mustang incident, I could already feel the tension in Willow Creek Estates tightening like a spring. The Whitmores hadn't spoken to me, but their glares were practically combustible, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried something even more audacious. Karen, it seemed, hadn't learned her lesson yet. From the safety of her pristine kitchen, she plotted quietly, making hushed phone calls, muttering about abuse of power and harassment, oblivious to the irony of her own behavior the day before. Justin, on the other hand, had a different approach. He lurked near the street, pretending to water the lawn but clearly staring at the Mustang as if willing it to drive itself into his driveway. The entitlement in his eyes was almost painful. By mid-afternoon, I decided it was time to confront the situation before it spiraled further. I stepped outside, Mustang keys in hand, ready for a casual cruise, partially to enjoy the car, partially to assert calm dominance. As I approached the driveway, I noticed Karen standing by the mailbox, phone pressed to her ear, muttering with a desperate intensity. "Chief Donovan, did you call her yet?" Justin asked, stepping out from behind a bush, startling me. "I don't call people who threaten me and my property," I said calmly, raising an eyebrow. "Especially not over a Mustang." "Mom says you're abusing your authority," he yelled, as if sheer volume could change reality. "Justin," I said, voice steady, "authority is earned. Respect is required. And manners, well, those are optional, but they help." Karen suddenly appeared beside him, now fully aware I was outside. She squared her shoulders, attempting to radiate power, but it came off as forced. "You can't treat us like this, Chief Donovan. We're citizens. You're supposed to protect us, not protect you from yourself?" I interrupted, letting my tone slice through her protest like a scalpel. "That's actually part of my job. And right now, protecting you from making fools of yourselves is my top priority." Her face flushed crimson, a mix of anger and humiliation. "I'll have you investigated for harassment," she spat. I chuckled lightly. "Go ahead. Just make sure you include the part where you tried to commandeer a private vehicle for your son." Her hands trembled, gripping her phone as if it were a lifeline. Justin shrank behind her, realizing he might be in more trouble than he imagined. The realization was evident in the way he avoided my gaze, twisting his sneakers nervously. Before Karen could call anyone, I turned to Justin. Tell me something, did you really think yelling and demanding would get you what you want? I thought it might, he admitted, his bravado crumbling. I shook my head, giving him a paternal, but no-nonsense look. You need to learn that entitlement doesn't replace effort. And tantrums don't replace respect. Karen's phone rang again, and she answered, her voice strained as she tried to maintain authority she clearly didn't have. Yes, Chief Donovan is outside again. I raised a hand, calm but commanding. Mrs. Whitmore, hang up. Take a deep breath. This isn't an emergency. Your sense of crisis management is. Trust me, you'll feel better once you step back. She hesitated, the tightness in her chest visible, then lowered the phone. Justin looked at her, confusion and frustration warring across his face. Lesson 1, I said, never call the police on someone over a personal disagreement. Lesson 2, always think twice before escalating a conflict in your neighborhood. And lesson 3, I let my gaze fall on both of them. Respect other people's property. Especially when they've earned it. For a moment, silence fell like a heavy curtain. Even the birds seemed to pause, as if listening to the drama unfold. Then, slowly, Karen muttered, We understand. I think. I smiled, not out of mockery, but out of relief. Good. Then consider this a learning experience. And a friendly warning next time, try to handle conflicts without dragging law enforcement into your entitlement issues. Justin nodded reluctantly, and Karen, though still visibly bristling, turned to retreat into her house. It was a small victory, but enough to restore the calm. Little did I know, the Mustang incident would echo far beyond the street, rippling into unexpected areas of the neighborhood and forcing Karen, and even Justin, to confront their behavior in ways neither were ready for. The following week, Willow Creek Estates felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Every time I pulled my Mustang into the driveway, I could feel Karen Whitmore's eyes burning through the curtains like lasers. Her glares were no longer subtle, they were deliberate, sharp, and relentless. Justin, on the other hand, had been relegated to lurking awkwardly in the background, an anxious shadow of his former entitled self. I tried to keep my life normal, mornings jogging, evenings polishing the Mustang, but in this neighborhood, normal was never enough. Every encounter, no matter how brief, carried the potential for escalation. And Karen had already proven that she was a master at escalation. It all came to a head on a Saturday afternoon. I had just returned from a police briefing and was cleaning the Mustang's engine bay when I noticed Karen storming down the sidewalk, Justin trailing behind like a reluctant second-in-command. Their pace was hurried, their expressions unreadable, but I sensed immediate trouble. Chief Donovan. Karen's voice cracked the calm air, sharp and unhinged. This is unacceptable. I'm filing a complaint with the HOA, the City Council, and Ann. I held up a hand. Mrs. Whitmore, take a breath. Let's not escalate this further than it already is. No. You've humiliated us. My son is being bullied by, she gestured wildly at the Mustang, as if the car had orchestrated the entire ordeal. You're abusing your power. Justin shuffled uncomfortably, glancing at me for some sort of backup. There would be none. I sighed, wiping my hands on a rag. Let me get this straight. You think a law-abiding citizen, defending his own property, is abusing power. And you still don't realize that calling the cops over a car you don't own is, well, the height of irony? Karen opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. Let's try something simple. A lesson you clearly didn't get last week. I stepped closer, letting my presence dominate the small cul-de-sac. I'm going to give you one chance to walk away, calmly, and reflect. Or we continue this, publicly. And trust me, the truth is not in your favor. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Justin looked like he was about to flee, the arrogance completely drained from him. But Karen was stubborn, too stubborn to admit defeat. Then, it happened. She reached for her phone. My instincts, sharp from decades in law enforcement, kicked in instantly. Mrs. Whitmore, I said, voice low but cutting, if you call the police again over a personal dispute, I will have no choice but to address it as a misuse of emergency services.
Do you understand me?
Her eyes widened, realizing the weight of her mistake. She hesitated, phone hovering midair, and I could almost see the internal battle raging, pride versus reality. Pride lost. Slowly, she lowered the device. Justin let out a shaky sigh.
Mom, maybe we should just go inside.
Karen spun toward him, a storm of frustration and embarrassment clouding her features.
Fine.
But this isn't over, she snapped, before retreating into the house, dragging Justin along like a captive recruit. I watched them go, the Mustang gleaming under the afternoon sun, as if smirking at the chaos it had inspired. A small smile crept onto my face, not of triumph, but of satisfaction. Justice, in its simplest and most elegant form, had been served. But then came the knock at my door. I opened it to find Mrs. Jenkins from down the street, holding a plate of cookies. Mike, she said softly, glancing behind her to ensure no one was watching, I think you taught them a lesson they'll never forget.
I accepted the plate with a nod.
Hopefully. Though I suspect they'll try something else eventually. Some people never learn, she muttered, shaking her head. I chuckled.
Some people need a little reminder.
The remainder of the day passed in a blissful calm. The cul-de-sac returned to its usual quiet, and the Mustang sat in the driveway, untouchable, untarnished, a symbol not just of my legacy but of respect, boundaries, and authority. By evening, I sat behind the wheel, engine humming gently, feeling the satisfaction of control and justice. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow across the neighborhood. I knew the Whitmores would be plotting, scheming, whispering behind closed doors, but that was their burden, not mine. I had done my part. The next morning, I noticed subtle changes. Karen avoided looking my way, muttering to herself whenever she glanced at my car. Justin no longer strutted with entitlement, he walked with a hesitant, almost cautious step, as if learning the first real lesson in respect of his life.
And the neighborhood?
They smiled knowingly whenever they saw me, aware that power, tempered with justice, had quietly reasserted itself. A few weeks later, the HOA held a meeting, ostensibly about landscaping regulations, but the elephant in the room was impossible to ignore.
Karen tried to muster her influence, attempting to sway opinions, but the memory of her humiliation at the Mustang incident hung over the room like a cloud.
Every complaint she tried to lodge, every rule she attempted to enforce, was met with polite resistance, and occasionally, suppressed laughter. I attended the meeting as a neighbor, not as the police chief. The Whitmores were polite enough, not out of newfound respect, but out of fear of repeating their previous mistakes. They had learned, painfully, that power without wisdom was dangerous, and arrogance without consequence was temporary. Driving home that evening, the Mustang roaring beneath me, I reflected on the chaos of the past weeks.
It had started with entitlement and an unnecessary police call.
It ended with respect, boundaries, and a reminder that authority was not something to be abused lightly. Karen and Justin would continue to live in Willow Creek Estates, plotting their next move, stewing in private frustrations, but one thing was clear, they had met their match, and that match wore the badge of experience, legacy, and quiet authority. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Mustang in a golden hue, I smiled.
Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. Some people had to be shown that respect wasn't optional.
And some Mustangs were simply untouchable. The neighborhood returned to its quiet rhythm, and I leaned back, savoring the hum of the engine. For now, the storm had passed. But Willow Creek Estates would never forget the day the police chief and the Mustang taught a mother and her son the meaning of respect.
And as for me?
I knew that, sometimes, being both neighbor and authority figure wasn't just a job.
It was a way of life.
And justice, in its quiet, powerful form, was always worth the wait.